This is essentially, remember, the best place if you have to pick up a lot of industry voices, a lot of industry chatter. What do people who are in the policy stage and who will ensure that the country goes on the growth path will be looking at when it comes to the big budget? Now, through the day, you've heard a lot of analysis, you've seen a lot of numbers, but a lot of people have been asking, is budget mein hamare liye kya hai? And that is the middle class. And if you thought that the middle class was perhaps wanting some kind of a reprieve, I think we weren't wrong. But there is just some bit of tinkering that has happened vis-a-vis the middle class. But do remember, there is something for almost everyone in the budget. The opposition says that this is a copy-paste job. They allege that most of the Congress manifesto and a lot of their interesting policies have been copy-pasted by the current government. The reason why they say this is a government that does not have any more ideas. But jobs, employment, these are core areas that have come back into focus. How will that pan out in the next, remember, many weeks to months in the run-up to this big Modi 3.0 budget? We will deep dive into that subject and much more through the day. And do remember, we are also standing by for the first detailed response that will come in from the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who's going to be taking a lot of these questions and speaking to the media in the next 30 minutes or so. And as always, Times Now will keep you head on that story. But let's begin by talking about the middle class. Where does the middle class today find itself in? There was a lot of perception that in the run-up to the 2024 battle, the middle class that has always formed that core support of the Modi government is drifting away. So there was a lot of chatter that that particular middle class that has also moved towards the Congress in, a somewhat way, possibly could be given some standard tax deduction, there could be a change in the tax regime. So the finance minister has kind of heard a bit of, that hope against hope. Now, on your screens, you're reading right now more details of the slab that will come into effect. But this, ladies and gentlemen, again, is if you have moved into the new tax regime. There is already an old tax regime and a new tax regime. And these deductions, the slabs that you see on your screens, will help you understand where do you fit into these particular tax brackets. The opposition, again, like I said, has been indicating that there is nothing good enough. There are not many great ideas when it comes to the government. But you have seen the government going in for big, bold reforms and long-stated reforms. We've seen the industry rather welcoming the entire budget. And they said that this does not seem like a populist budget. The government that has maintained the larger narrative of continuity wants to ensure that they maintain that same momentum on the path to a Viksit Bharat, something that the Prime Minister has said time and again. He says Viksit Bharat in 2047. In fact, we will read through this graphic that you see on your screens right now. That will also tell you more about the kind of tax that you will have to now pay, which is the bracket that will be applicable to you depending on what really is your income. And do remember, there is also this standard deduction that has been increased from the existing 50,000 to a 75,000. If you're a salaried class employee, but this, the caveat is that you need to have moved into the new tax regime. That, remember, is the default regime here on, and clearly Nirmala Sitharaman earlier has also said that there is going to be a review of the tax regime, something that was warranted for a long time. You've also seen the markets responding, in fact, not doing too very well. If you look at the tracker also on the bottom of your screens, you will get a larger idea of what we are really talking about. And the long-term capital gains tax, again, is something that people have been writing to us, speaking about. So that, again, is one issue that we will deep dive into in just a moment. What we'll also do now is we will quickly connect with a panel of guests joining us. I'm told we can get in Shehzad. He represents the BJP. We also have Lokesh Jindal, who's a political analyst. He does lean towards the Congress. And we also have Patabhi Ram, who represents the TDP. And interesting is what a lot of people, Patabhi, are also saying, that this is a budget that has essentially gone in for Andhra and for Bihar. What about the other states? Is that a fair criticism? How happy are you?
I don't really agree to the statement. Yes, we are extremely happy for what all had been done for Andhra Pradesh, which was much needed, because we all know that Andhra had severely lost because of the bifurcation and the AP Reorganization Act, a lot. And today, a lot of allocations have been done, 15,000 crore for our state capital, funds for the Polvaram project, funds for the backward districts. So we are all extremely happy and thankful to the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and the Honorable Finance Minister. But at the same time, you can't just say that this budget is just limited to one or two states. I mean, you see, there was a mention about funds for Himachal. There was a mention of about funds to Uttarakhand and the northeastern states, Odisha. So you can't just say that this budget is only for Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. That is absolutely unfair. There are a lot of schemes that are applicable to all the states in the country. For example, you take the 1.5 lakh crore interest-free funding for infrastructure projects, which is applicable to all the states. The 11 lakh crore which has been allocated for infrastructure is not just for one or two states, it's for the entire country. And also the kind of focus that has been given on employment and skill development, all those schemes, they are not limited to a few states. So this criticism that, that this budget is only for one or two states or for
let me see if Lokesh, Patabi really agrees with what you're saying. And if that is a fair criticism or not. Lokesh, I can barely see you very clearly. Maybe it's because of the light, but why are you looking so gloomy? I mean, the country is saying it's a great budget. Look at how happy Patabi is. The Janata Dal United is so happy. Why are you sad, Lokesh?
Because the budget is gloomy. See, if you look at the scenario, there has been a gradual deterioration in household savings. It has reduced down to 5%. And what was expected was the government coming out with a decent tax slab. So that
Lokesh, apologies. I will just have to interrupt because I'm told the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is speaking right now. Let's cut across live.
Friends, I request you to follow this following point of order. It would be good if you each of one ask one question each. That will facilitate others to ask questions. And we will try to take most of the questions in this press conference. Ma'am will directly answer your question without any preliminary statement. Over to ma'am. Over to question. Anybody? All question 71, please.
मैम तरुण फ्रॉम जी बिजनेस। मैम आपने आज के बजट में शॉर्ट टर्म कैपिटल गेन और लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन दोनों के रेट्स को बढ़ाया है और रियल एस्टेट में आपने इंडेक्सेशन के बेनिफिट को खत्म किया है। तो मैम क्या हम माने कि जो इक्विटी है अब आप उसको बाकी एसेट्स क्लास के बराबर लाना चाह रहे हैं, इस वजह से आपने लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन के टैक्स रेट को 10% से 12.5% किया।
First of all, thank you very much for coming here. After having heard the budget, I chose not to make an opening statement because you've heard me almost for 1.5 hours, and I'm sure you have you're eager to know what is in the budget and also seek clarification. For your just for a matter of drawing your attention, we've put up a single slide which has used the word employment as an acronym to capture that is everything in the budget. So each letter actually highlights the important points of the budget, and we can elaborate more on that a bit later, but employment captures everything to do with this budget. And I would like you to, for a moment, spend a time on it. And deriving from that, everything which has been said in the budget falls in place. But with that said, yes, your question is on the point there is we wanted to simplify the approach to taxation, also for the capital gains. One. Second, if anything, the average taxation actually has come down when we say it is 12.5%. Because we've worked out for each of the different asset classes, each varied with the indexation. I'll ask secretaries to elaborate on it. But the point that we brought it down from below the average to 12.5, which is the lowest if you can look at the last several years, encourages investment in the markets. With that said, I'll ask Somanathan or who is going to elaborate, Sanjay, on the specifics.
So you had, there were, I think, two or more parts to your question. One was on real estate and gold and other assets. So earlier the rate was 20% with indexation. It has now been reduced to 12.5% without indexation. If you assume that the rate of return on real estate is typically above 10% per annum, and if you take inflation at about 4% per annum, the real rate of return was earlier, let's say, somewhere between 6 and 16% per annum in real estate. If it was 16%, 20% of 16% was being taxed. The effective rate was 16%. It has gone down to 12.5%. If the rate of return was 10% per annum nominal, it has also remained approximately the same at 12.5%. So actually there is either a reduction or no change in respect of the effective rate of tax on property and gold. Now, as regards the equity, yes, it has gone up from 10 to 12.5, but you'll also find that unlisted equity has gone down from 20 with indexation to 12.5 without indexation. Basically, we have a very, very simple, easy regime. All listed, all unlisted are at 12.5% long term. And all are at 20%, I mean, equities are at 20% and everything else is at applicable rate for short term. So yes, short term has gone up, and yes, long term has been rationalized. It has not necessarily gone up. And Sanjay, would you like to add anything?
One point I would like to add over here is that we also need to keep in mind as to the kind of people who are actually paying these taxes, the capital gains on the securities, the listed securities especially. And so over there, when we did this analysis for the year 22-23, we found that about 88% of the tax is actually coming from people who have an income of more than 15 lakh. 61% of that income is actually coming from people who have an income of more than 1 crore.
That is income on capital gains on this.
And we are all aware that otherwise, you know, the standard rate is, you know, about 30%. And for some it can go up to 39%. So this marginal, very small marginal increase is actually impacting only those, primarily those who have an income of more than 15 lakh rupees per year.
Okay, number 3.
On capital gains.
Ma'am, Timsi Jaipuria from CNBC TV 18. You announced a very lucrative new tax regime with changes in tax slabs. A lot of new changes are there in the income tax side, on the revenue side. And in the speech you mentioned that revenue foregone will be around 29,000 crore rupees, whereas government will now try to mobilize around 30,000 crore rupees. What will be these revenue mobilization measures, and from where do you think this foregone revenue will be recovered? If you can highlight, where are you foregoing the revenue and where are you going to recoup this revenue from?
First of all, it is not just because we've mentioned it in this budget, but the attempt to widen the tax net is something which we've been repeatedly saying, that India's tax net will have to be widened, whether it is in the direct taxation or indirect. Second, there are also now the PSU dividends which are improving because their valuations have gone up really high. And their performance is also now substantially increased. So revenue mobilization is not just tax-based, you have non-tax revenue mobilizations which are also coming up. Then we had for almost now 3 years been talking about asset monetization, which is not selling of assets, but optimum utilization of those assets which are lying in the form of unutilized stadiums or land which is available with PSUs which can be utilized for better purposes. That's a third one. Fourth, you're also looking at generating resources from newer areas. So in all those, the revenue is going to be mobilized better, and as a result of which the revenue foregone will be now made up for, is our expectation. We've said that in the budget. In my speech itself, I mentioned it, and I'm sure there are secretaries who will want to add to it. Sanjay?
Ma'am, I'll give the details. 37,000 crore, 29,000 crore in direct taxes and 8,000 crore in indirect taxes. So 29,000 crore direct taxes primarily comprises of three taxes, which is the increase in the STT only on derivatives, which is only on futures and options. And secondly, the buyback tax, which is to be now done in the hands of the recipient. While on the one hand, it will rationalize the tax and be more equitous and fair, because those who should be paying the taxes, higher taxes, in the higher income groups, they will pay higher tax, and those who are in nil tax category or in lower tax category, they don't have to pay a tax or a lower tax. While it does that, at the same time, it does bring in some revenue also, about 4,000 crore, and remaining, about 15,000 crore should come, from the capital gains taxes. On the indirect taxes, we are losing, as I said, about 8,000 crore primarily on the reduction in duties, especially in gold. There is a huge reduction from 15% to 6%. And then there is revenue foregone because of the personal income tax rates and the standard deduction being allowed in the new tax regime.
280, please. Backside, please. Give the mic.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Surabhi from Business Today. Ma'am, the angel tax has been abolished, which is a very welcome move. But just wanted to understand that one of the things the angel tax was also doing was checking money laundering concerns. So could you explain how these will be taken care of now? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to hear it is welcome. You've been raising this issue as with many others outside of media also saying, are you considering it? Although it was introduced during the UPA government and it was introduced in 2012. 2 years had passed, and since after that when we came in, we tried keeping as is good governance principle, government being a continuum, the tax continued. Although we tried giving carve-outs for startups and also making it simpler, bringing parity for the non-resident Indians, the way in which they've been treated as opposed to the Indian investments and so on. Today we've announced that we will indeed remove it. Exactly the details, Sanjay, would you want to elaborate on it?
Yes, sure, ma'am. So we should be aware that this is actually a tax measure. It's not really a money laundering issue, but money laundering issue was being tackled through a tax measure. So first of all, I want to clarify that this tax, there are other provisions in the income tax itself, first of all, to find out the source of these funds. Number two, there is already, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which continues to be in existence. So if there is money which is being laundered, money being paid as a bribe or for use in other purposes for terrorism, etc., there are enough laws, including the now the Nyaya Sahita, Bharatiya Nyaya Sahita, and the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to take care of those issues. While on the other hand, now some genuine money for investment, actually there is this deterrent provision no longer exists, while provisions for money laundering remain, and they should be sufficient to cater to it.
I would add that there are also certain provisions of the Companies Act which can be invoked if there is deliberate undervaluation of shares. So there are other legal remedies. The balance here is between preventing money laundering but accidentally also preventing investment. So that balance is what we are seeking to get it right.
211, backside. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Prakash Pedashi from ET Now. My question is, will the increased STT be applicable from April 1 or prospective? And if from April 1, will there be retrospective tax calculation for the increased amount?
It's not retrospective. It is with effect from 1st of October 2024. So we are giving sufficient time for the exchanges and the people, who collect this tax to put their systems in place to be able to collect it. It's not retrospective, it is prospective.
13. 11. 11.
Ma'am, Karishma here from Business Today. Ma'am, congratulations to you and everybody. Ma'am, my question is on this special assistance to Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. 15,000 crore is the number that you've given for Andhra Pradesh for this financial year. Is there further assistance that you are looking at, or is it going to be need-based in terms of the amount?
I've already mentioned in the budget speech that 15,000 crore is coming through the multilateral development assistance, which we borrow from the multilateral banks, whether it is World Bank or ADB or AIB, whatever. And I've also ended that paragraph by saying further assistance will also be extended.
There is no definitive amount?
No.
152.
मैम आलोक प्रियदर्शी फ्रॉम CNBC आवाज में मैम सवाल यही है कि जिस तरह से आप लोग न्यू टैक्स रिजीम को प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, उन्होंने स्लैब में चेंज किया, स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन बढ़ाया, तो ये मान के चलें कि न्यू टैक्स रिजीम के जरिए आप मिडिल क्लास को राहत देने की कोशिश की है इस बार। ओल्ड टैक्स रिजीम को लेकर क्या कोई सनसेट क्लॉज है? क्योंकि आपने कहा है कि जो इनकम टैक्स एक्ट है उसका हम लोग कंप्रिहेंसिव रिव्यू करेंगे, तो रिव्यू में क्या ये मान के चले कि सनसेट टाइम आएगा ओल्ड टैक्स रिजीम को लेकर?
अभी मैं बोल नहीं सकती हूँ। जरूर हमारी इरादा ये है कि सिंपलर टैक्सेशन रजीम होना चाहिए, और सिंपल टैक्स रजीम की ओर अगर हम जा रहे हैं ये रिव्यू के द्वारा, वो ही हमारी मकसद होगा कि सिंपल कर दो। ओल्ड टैक्स रजीम को सिंपल करने के रास्ते पर ही ये नया टैक्स रजीम आया है। सनसेट होगा कि नहीं होगा वो अभी मैं बोल नहीं सकती हूँ, वो रिव्यू करने के बाद ही हम एक डिसीजन लेंगे।
और ये एक आंकड़ा मैं आपको दे दूं कि इस बार पिछली बार जो हमने परिवर्तन किए थे नई टैक्स प्रणाली में, तो 70% लोग अभी तक जो 4 करोड़ के लगभग हमारे पास में रिटर्न प्राप्त हुए हैं पिछले वर्ष के, 70% ने इसको प्रेफर किया है बनिस्बत की पुरानी प्रणाली को। बड़ी तेजी से लोग नई प्रणाली की ओर आकर्षित हो रहे हैं और हमारा यही प्रयास रहेगा।
Yes.
Ongoing period.
Not yet.
I mean, more returns are coming in.
Yes.
271.
Hi, ma'am. This is Sumit Chaturvedi, ET Now. Ma'am, the corporate tax for foreign companies has been slashed to 35%. I want to understand the broad intent of this intention behind this decision, and what kind of benefits to economy, increase in investment you are expecting.
You've, in your own question, answered it. We want more investment to come into this country. So that is why it has been brought down.
$95.
Just to add to that, there was a widened differential between foreign and domestic companies which arose after the tax cut in 2019. When the domestic rates were cut, the foreign rates were not cut. So there was a widening of the gap. With today's change, there is still a higher rate of tax for foreign companies, but it is not now disproportionately higher than domestic, and therefore this is something where, according to the feedback received from industry, we expect more foreign companies to invest now that this regime is adjusted in this manner.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Pal Singh from Outlook Business. You have earmarked a significant allocation towards rural infrastructure today. So how much of a boost to consumption and overall demand are we expecting here from this allocation?
So it is difficult to quantify what would be the accretion to demand coming from. I mean, the obvious increase is whatever we have increased. But yes, would there be a multiplier? Probably yes. I think with the Awas Yojana Gramin and the Gram Sadak Yojana, these two do have a lot of multiplier effects as well. Traditionally, for capital expenditure, the multiplier has been calculated at somewhere around 2.5 to 3. In the Awas Yojana, it may be a little lower. But yes, there would be a substantial multiplier. I don't have a precise calculation.
But other than the Awas Yojana and Sadak Yojana, Gram Sadak Yojana, there's a major push towards the corridors. For instance, I mentioned in the context of Bihar, I mentioned in the context of Andhra, 2 corridors which are moving, one from Visakhapatnam to Chennai, the other moving from Hyderabad to Bangalore, Buxar, Purnia, and so on, and building of the Gaya node in the Amritsar to Kolkata are all towards building infrastructure in the rural areas in order that we attract more investment and enable transit of goods in those huge corridors. All these are essentially going to the rural areas in a big way. And therefore, it is not just through PM Awas Yojana and Sadak Yojana, but major investments in strengthening the corridors, building nodes, and therefore also in improving the rural infrastructure is happening.
11.
Ma'am, I'm Maria Shakir from NDTV and NDTV Profit. Congratulations for creating history today by becoming the only finance minister for having presented 7 consecutive budgets. Ma'am, my question to you is about the first-timer scheme, because as you said, that employment perhaps sums up the essence of this budget. Would there be more blueprint coming out as to how this first-timers scheme will be playing out, and what will be the role of private sector?
Just 1 minute. See, this Prime Minister's package that I announced has 5 different schemes. The first timers is, I would think, one of the very, very innovative initiative. So what we are doing there is to be able to provide first timers 1 whole month's salary as subsidy. And this will be put into their account as direct benefit transfer, but possibly in tranches. When an employer picks up a first timer, and this is through the EPFO that you get to know that they have paid their provident fund amounts, and therefore the first timer indicator that we are talking about will be established. So they can't just say one of the existing employee is a first timer and claim it. There are enough checks and balances in the system to make sure that indeed the first timer is coming in. And then the first timers will be put through that learning curve, and this will help them to acquire skills so that they become fully productive. This kind of a subsidy giving, 1, you give the first one month's salary. 2, you're also giving both for the employee and for the employer subsidy. So the applicable person for whom it is being given may even draw a wage up to 1 lakh rupees. But to the extent of 15,000 is what you're giving as a subsidy. The installments, as I said, for the first 1 month wage that you want to give will be done over 3 installments, direct into the first time employee's account. One compulsory measure that we are bringing in there is to make sure that the employee undergoes online financial literacy course before claiming the second installment from the government. So he may be a qualified engineer, he may be a diploma holder, he's a first-time employee in an office, he becomes a first-time employee and the employer also claims that he's been recruited. We try giving him the 15,000 rupees. He may have a salary of 1 lakh, but up to 15,000 rupees is what we are going to give. And in that, if you're giving 3 installments, the first installment will be given. But before he draws the second installment, he should undergo an online financial literacy course so that he can claim the second one. So we are not training him in engineering, we are training him in financial literacy. Post that, of course, the place where he goes to work, he's going to be working in any case. Then subsidy to be refunded if in case the employer removes him from the work within 12 months. So the employer gets a subsidy as well, but he will have to refund it if within 12 months this first-time employer has been removed out of the work. This will cover, and we expect it to cover, 1 crore persons per annum. And the scheme will run for 2 years. So up to 24 months, you can have new employees brought in, new first-time employees brought in, for whom the government will give 15,000 rupees as from our side, 1 month, what we think, 1 month's salary. Although his salary may be any amount, but to a cap of 1 lakh. And then he undergoes some financial literacy course, post which the second installment and the third installments can be withdrawn, put into his account. But most important is if the employer removes him within 12 months, the employer will have to refund the subsidy given to the employer. So that's how that scheme works.
278.
If I may just add, details are available in the budget speech in the annexure on page 31. So there are details of all the 5 schemes in this package. If you go through them, there's considerable amount of detail which you can get.
Hi, good evening. This is Priyashmita from Informist. I have 2 points from the budget that I would like to ask. The first is nominal GDP has been pegged at 10.5%. And we have seen that growth is on a high momentum, and even the RBI has pegged growth at 7.2%. And the Econ survey said that it is going to be between 6.5 to 7%. So 10.5% nominal GDP looks a little conservative. What is your view on it? And the second is that there's a mention that beyond FY26, you would want to reduce your debt to GDP. And you've mentioned that, the 4% debt to GDP it's a thing of the past. So what do you think is a sustainable debt to GDP or a desirable debt to GDP at this point? Thank you.
What was the first question again?
Conservative nominal GDP projection.
See, 10.5% could be a combination of 7% growth and 3.5% GDP deflator. So a combination of wholesale price plus consumer price could easily be 3.5%. That's a very likely scenario. So 7 plus 3.5, yes, it is slightly conservative, but I don't think it is way off what is likely. Or it could be 6.5% growth and 4% inflation as per the deflator. So I think the number is reasonable, slightly conservative, yes, but we would prefer to achieve the numbers. Second, on the path after 26-27, which has been outlined in the Finance Minister's speech at the end of the Part A. So the commitment, as she has mentioned, is to endeavor to reduce the debt to GDP every year. That is in future the fiscal consolidation path. What is the percentage that would result in that fiscal consolidation is not something that we are disclosing here today or can disclose today. It will depend on circumstances. But there is a commitment to lower the debt to GDP ratio. So if every year it has to be reduced, there will necessarily have to be a particular level of deficit which we cannot exceed. And that will depend on prevailing growth rates, interest rates, and the other parameters which go into the calculation of the debt dynamics. But I can tell you that it is most likely to be a figure not above 4.5%.
249.
मैं सुनील सौरभ बोल रहा हूँ। मैं आप पहले तो आपको काफी बधाई दे दूं कि बहुत अच्छा बजट आपने पेश की है। दूसरा मुझे ये जानना है कि रेलवे के लिए क्या कुछ खास रहा बजट में?
Which organization you are from?
कौन सा पत्रिका से?
पेपर में हूँ, लोक भारती पेपर है।
सॉरी,
लोक भारती।
लोक भारती।
जी हाँ। तो पहले तो बधाई दे दिया हूँ मैं आपका, बहुत अच्छा बजट आपने पेश की है और रिकॉर्ड भी की है। 7 साल से लगातार आप वित्त मंत्री के रूप में काम। मेरा कहना है कि रेलवे के लिए क्या कुछ खास हुआ, क्योंकि कोई जानकारी हम लोग को अभी तक नहीं मिली कि रेलवे के लिए क्या गया है। दूसरा, मैम, रेलवे में सीनियर सिटीजन्स को कंसेशन मिलता था, आप यहाँ पीआईबी में है, पीआईबी जर्नलिस्ट को भी कंसेशन मिलता था। कोरोना में वो बंद हो गया, कोरोना को ख़त्म हुए भी 2-3 साल हो गए हैं, तो फिर से ये बहाल नहीं हुआ। क्या इसकी उम्मीदें हम लोग कर सकते हैं कि आगे बहाल होगी या नहीं?
रेलवे का जो एक्सपेंडिचर बजट है नेक्स्ट ईयर, इट्स 2,55,393 crores, which is the highest ever, and a very substantial increase in recent years. So that is a very large amount of investment in the railway. So I think there is a very adequate provision.
जर्नलिस्ट के लिए कंसेशन
ठीक है, सुना।
277 प्लीज।
इसमें सीनियर सिटीजन और पीआईबी जर्नलिस्ट को भी जो स्लैब में रिवीजन हुआ है उसमें फायदा है। सीनियर सिटीजन को फैमिली पेंशन में स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन का फायदा हुआ है रेलवे में। अच्छा, ठीक।
हेलो मैम, दिस साइड हर्ष कुमार, दिस साइड फ्रॉम बिजनेस।
वो बजट का फायदा जो दिया है सर, वो भी तो मिलेगा सीनियर सिटीजन को और सबको, रेलवे में भी मिलेगा।
Hello ma'am, Harsh Kumar this side from Business Standard newspaper.
Trying to, since 2014, bring in ease of doing business in India, and in every sector where there was only 26% allowed for FTA, we raised it to 49, and then where it is possible we've raised it to 74, and so on. So there's been a consistent, continuing effort to relax our policy towards FTA. First it went sector by sector, then there was this approach taken so that most of which can go through the automatic route. So in that process, further simplification if necessary, we are willing to do, is what is conveyed.
Also ma'am, you have increased the Mudra loan limit to 20 lakhs, like that cap. So can we expect the increase in Shishu, Tarun, their types increase? So how much it will be? Can you give detail on that?
We've said this only today. See how this works.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the coverage that continues from the CII, and do remember, obviously you've seen a lot of political to and fro, a lot of charges, counter charges, where the Congress continues to maintain that the budget that has been presented by the Finance Minister is nothing but copy-paste. It's a budget that Rahul Gandhi says is a kursi bachao budget because the government is dependent on the allies. The reason why the focus was to ensure that the allies are kept happy. The reference directly is both to the TDP and to the JDU. And we also, remember, do have, our political panel joining us. Along with that, we also have guests who will add more merit. Remember to really tell us in brass tacks and in details about what are the highlights of this budget and how do they assess this. So I'm just requesting Patabi, also Tariq Khanji, to be with us for a moment as I'll quickly introduce both Gauri Puri, who's partner at the Shardul Amarchar and Mangaldas, and Keshav Bajanka, Executive Director at Century Plyboards, both with us. And Gauri, let's begin by asking you, if I would say, how much would you rate this budget on a score of, rate card of 10? Where do you think this government has done really well, and what really are the areas it could have done far better? Gauri.
I think in terms of a rate card, if I have to say, I would say somewhere around 7 to 8. I think that if we assess from a direct tax standpoint, right, most of the tax proposals have been very bold. We've seen the abolition of the angel tax, which the industry has been grappling with for a very, very long time, especially the startup community, and it was impacting capital inflows into the country. We've seen the abolition of the 2% equalization levy, which had essentially become very difficult for foreign companies to comply with and the Indian government to enforce, because it was essentially a self-compliance kind of a tax. And I think that is, again, a very, very welcome change. In terms of rationalization of capital gains tax rates, again, I think that it had become a very complex regime with, different holding periods for varying asset classes and different tax rates for, residents and non-residents. So the simplification is, again, very welcome. Of course, there are trade-offs because there has been an increase in long-term capital gains rates, 12.5% for certain investors. The on-market trades, you see the short-term capital gains tax going up, by 5%. But at the same time, we see a reduction in the limitation period, that was applicable for reassessments coming down from 11 years down to, again, 5 to 6 years, which is a great change because it offers tax certainty. So I would say that this is a good budget because the government has kept its ear on the ground as far as industry's demands were concerned on direct tax front.
Okay, I think Gauri, you've given me a complete, well-rounded view of how you see this budget. Keshav, what about you? And what's the number that you possibly would be willing to give at, to this budget out of 10? And what really are the areas that the government has left untouched? Why is everyone not happy with this budget?
I think I would give the budget an 8 on 10. We must give credit where credit is due, and I think that overall the focus on long term and short term both has been there. In terms of long term, they have continued with the thrust on infrastructure, 11 lakh crores plus dedicated towards infrastructure. That is likely to lead to a far more robust economy going forward. And in the short term, employment was becoming a big hindrance. So I think they have definitely taken steps to improve the employment generation possibilities in the country. But having said that, for the real estate sector, other than the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, 3 crore new houses that have been announced, there haven't been too many things that are going to really, push the momentum in the short term. As such, I would say that is an area where perhaps the government missed a trick.
Okay. I just hope, Keshav, the FM is still listening to a lot of this feedback, because it's really important to understand where possibly we could have done far better. And with your permission, I quickly want to, take this to a panel of political guests also. And thank you for their patience to Patabhi and also to Mohammad Tariq Khan, who represents the SP. And Tariq, I'll come to you quickly. Rahul Gandhi says, ye to kursi bachao budget hai. Now, is the opposition right now criticizing the budget for the sake of it, or is there any merit even in that argument? Because both the allies, whether it is the TDP or whether it is the JDU, say that this was long overdue. So why do you say this is a kursi bachao budget?
No, when we talk about budget, there is a lot to talk about taxes, and that is direct and indirect. So you talk about direct taxes, all right. You have done something to that. But when we talk about indirect taxes, that means the burden on the people of India. So what steps has been taken to reduce that? Tell me, I just want to know what steps they have taken to reduce those indirect taxes, as well as in reverse they will just reduce.
Tariq, are you saying the government hasn't done enough?
Let me complete another point. Food inflation is soaring near about 9%. I just want to know the steps taken by the government, long term as well as short term, micro or macro, whatever it would be. I just want to know the steps government has taken to reduce those things, those rates of food. Every year we face.
All right, so the opposition clearly not happy. Tariq, apologies, I'm cutting you short because I've completely run out of time. And I thank Patabhi, Tariq Khanji, and also Gauri and Keshav for their time, their perspective. And through this evening, this is our top focus.